So, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Schooled In. My name is John Lunn, aka Johnny Chips, and in this video series, we take a deeper dive into some awesome cloud technology. I'll be joined by a fantastic guest from across the community who've kindly taken some time out of their day to come and join me and school me in that particular tech topic. So, whether you are watching this on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or LinkedIn, thanks so much for tuning in. Really is appreciated. Please do take part in the chat below. Drop us some comments. A like and a subscribe would go down really well. That would be really appreciated. Okay, so today as threats to our organization, they become more complex and persistent. We kind of see an increased monitoring and alerting requirements, which, look, they can easily overwhelm, the most seasoned of security teams. So Microsoft have got some awesome solutions out there to help us navigate that landscape and understand how to respond to those alerts and, suspected threats across our organization. So, with that being said, I'm super thrilled to be joined today by security architect, MVP, blogger, podcaster, and awesome community folk, Mr. Rue Campbell, who today is going to school me in Microsoft 365 Defender. And how you doing, Rue? Thanks for joining me.
Hey, it's great to be with you. I'm so impressed by the production quality of your show compared to my show. It's
Thank you,
it puts us to shame. No, really good stuff.
Oh, don't be. This is 2 years of being locked in a room. Yeah, this is 2 years.
Yeah,
we were just chatting before the amount of time and effort that it takes to get to this stage, and I'm no Hollywood producer, Rue. So, but thank you.
Give it time. Give it time.
No, well, look, honestly, I mean, look, it's the first time we've said hello properly. We've been kind of in each other's DMs and Twitter threads throughout the last couple of years over COVID. I've seen you're up to some really cool stuff across the community. I mean, it's fair to say I'm over on the Azure side of the fence. You're over on the 365, the security world as well. Two, really great areas. But I guess we're like passing ships through. Is that fair to say? There's probably some synergies there. But look. Part of this show is to invite guests like yourself, some awesome fellow MVPs and community folk on to talk about some specific tech areas. So we got a really good topic today. But look, before we get stuck in, I don't know if you want to give yourself a bit of a better intro. Let us know what you're up to in your day job and that kind of stuff. That might be a great place to start. If that's all right with you, Rue?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, Rue Campbell, Microsoft MVP for about 6 months now, I think. We were just talking before the show. You and I are MVP siblings, awarded, fortunately, the same month. So the day job is a security architect, and I specialize in the Microsoft stack. So if it's a security solution that Microsoft offer, or if it's just a software service that Microsoft offer, and you want to secure it, that's where me and my team we step in, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and they're doing more and more in security. So it's keeping us busy. And, well, if we're talking about Microsoft 365 Defender today, we have a lot to talk about.
Well, I was going to say that, Rue. I think it's fair to say whenever you talk about security in any guise, it's such a hugely overloaded concept and term. What part of security, and in fact, the podcast that I do, we were recently talking about this very topic. So, yeah, really excited to get stuck into M365, Defender, see what that's all about. Get your take on it and where we are today. But so I guess should we jump in, Rue? I mean,
yeah, let's go for it. I'll share my screen and I'll get my whiteboard up, and we'll do a little bit of education. So
let's go for it. Thanks, Rue.
Yeah, cool. So I'll start by showing you it, right? So what I'm in just now is what some folks will call the security portal. You go to security.microsoft.com. If you're a Microsoft 365 customer, subscriber, this is where you land. The security portal is kind of now called Microsoft 365 Defender. But what is it? You'll have played with it before, but let's kind of, I like to explain really what it is. And to do that, what I'm going to do is, if I can master the technology, I'm going to get the whiteboard up here, and I'm going to go kind of, I'm going to put
take it slow, Rue. You'll have to take it slow for me.
Yeah, sure, no worries. Well, I'll question you at the end of it, and we'll see how well you paid attention.
How much you're sunk in, yeah, absolutely.
So 365 Defender is part of a kind of a new category of security service called Extended Detection and Response, right? And you can, so it's an XDR platform, but it's also a stack of a whole bunch of security services. So I'll start, I kind of describe it as, and you can hear and see my terrible writing here. So we've got M365D at the top there, Microsoft 365 Defender. And that kind of sits right at the top here. And then it's made up of 4 core services. And these are the things that you'd probably be familiar with, heard their names, heard what their old names used to be, and all the controversy with renaming them. So we have, within that, we have Defender for Endpoint. And you'll notice that some people come very prepared, very professional, ready with slideshows. I come with a whiteboard and a pen.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's working for me, Ru. It works for me.
So we get Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which has gone through a ton of name changes. Used to be called all the way back to Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, or ATP. That's what a lot of folks know as.
I remember that.
Yeah. And that is, it's a ton of stuff. To oversimplify it, it's your endpoint protection platform. So it does anti-malware, but it really does a whole lot more. And that's really to do with the telemetry that it can provide to the cloud. And I'll show you a little bit about that. So
that's the bit that sits on the Windows 10 device, or whatever the endpoint is, effectively. That's
and you're right. And when you say whatever the endpoint, you're spot on there, because you can do it on Windows 10, 11. You can do it on Mac OS. You can do it on Android. You can do it on iOS. You can even do it on Linux now for a number. Almost, I think most of the core popular Linux servers, you can also run Defender for Endpoint on to get your endpoint protection on those. And if you're old enough to remember, what Microsoft's approach to Linux used to be, calling it certain things, that's kind of, it's changed days now. Microsoft want to get on every type of operating system and protect it.
Cool. Okay.
So that's Defender for Endpoint. That's one of the pillars of this service, I guess you could describe it as. The next pillar really is what we call, I guess, and I'm going to try and zoom it in here a wee bit, is Office 365, right? So I don't have to explain what Office 365 is. Everybody that's watching your show will know what it is. But kind of think of this as not just defending your email, like so we'll talk a little bit about the kind of advanced protections it offers there.
Okay, yeah.
We then have, and we're going to keep busy here, if my pen works, we also then have, let me just get this working.
It's always a way. Technology is a fantastic thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I've made the mistake of using an Apple device, which if you're a Microsoft consultant, usually isn't a good thing. Tell you what, let me just go there, and we'll punch that in. And yeah, so the third pillar that we have is called Defender for Identity, and I'm going to use my mouse here instead of my pen, and you're really going to see the terrible
struggle to write with that now. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, using a big ergonomic mouse here. Identity. There you go. It makes me.
We can pause for a sec if you want, Ru, and get you.
No. We're okay.
No, you're good.
We'll keep going. So we have Defender for Identity, and what that does is that protects on-prem Active Directory. If you're a sysadmin in our space, you'll know about Active Directory, right? It's kind of it's omnipresent. Every enterprise uses Active Directory, and what this does is this tries to protect that environment. So that's Defender for Identity. And then the last pillar that we have as part of this suite called Microsoft 365 Defender is we have what is now called Defender for Cloud Apps. And my pen is now working. That is a lot better. Defender for Cloud Apps. This used to be called MCAS, or Cloud App Security. This is the most recent victim of their name changes. And this is actually about protecting your SaaS estate. So this plugs into, for example, it plugs into Office 365, but it also plugs into Google Workspace, plugs into Dropbox, plugs into Workday, all these kind of SaaS services.
Yeah. So
protect
I
and
think
honor.
I remember seeing something about this now. So effectively, that's the kind of you can use that. Is that so? Cloud App Security or Defender for Cloud Apps is the bit that you can kind of understand what third-party applications or cloud apps your business is using, so you can then overlay some security control, so you don't get this kind of shadow IT formulating. Is
Yes,
that
that
product there, Rue? Is it?
that is spot on. That's exactly what you're thinking of. It does a few things. One, it discovers shadow IT, so it'll look at your firewall logs and say, "Oh, here's all the stuff users are doing that you didn't know about."
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, and then if you do know about it, you can hook into it through the APIs and you can control it. And I'll show you some of the cool stuff that can do.
Nice.
Now,
Nice.
so all this stuff is cool, right? These are great. We've got these 4 platforms that give us security across endpoints, Office 365 identity, and our cloud estate. But
Yeah.
where the value really comes is combining the telemetry that all these services offer. So what happens is endpoint sends its logs to 365 Defender, so does Defender for Office, so does Defender for Identity, and so does Defender for Cloud Apps. So I've got
Right.
one
Okay. Yeah.
single pane that I need to look at to see all my threats. So, I don't have to look at the
With
email
you.
solution. I don't need to look at the antivirus. It's all in one place and it tells me the full story.
Okay, so I see. So you've got your endpoint, you've got the additional functionality and protections you can do around the data that's sat in that Office 365 tenant. You can do some good security things around that. Identity, Rue, does it do on-prem identity as well? So you can hook into your on-prem domain controllers, or is it just
Yes,
Azure AD?
it does. Yes. So Microsoft describe it as hybrid identity protection.
Sure.
So not
Okay.
only can this pull forward data from Azure Active Directory, so risky sign-ins and things, you can see them in 365 Defender, but
Yeah.
also using Defender for Identity, you install an agent on domain controllers, and any suspicious
Cool.
behavior that's happening on-prem, that will also come through.
And I guess it's things like people resetting their passwords, constantly getting their password wrong, or a certain amount of times. Those kind of events are being logged on those domain controllers or in Azure AD, and that's the logs that are getting sent to the Defender portal effectively.
Yeah, that's right. So as far as kind of the strange behavior that on-prem it will report to you, it
Hmm.
does a bunch of things. So if there's a common attack pack, a common attack vector, like something like you know, uh, Kerberoasting or pass the ticket, these kind of things, it will tell you about those, but it will also go through a learning period and it will find out what is a baseline of normal user behavior. And if it starts
Okay,
deviating from that, it'll tell you. So, Joe
cool.
Blogs in finance, all of a sudden at midnight, he's signing into some random PC he's never signed into before.
Okay.
That kind of
That's
stuff.
clever, yeah. So
Yeah.
they're leveraging. Because I saw some great demos around, things like conditional access and risk-based sign-in. If you're in one country, then you're coming from another country. Clearly there's potentially something fishy going on there. So, but
Yes.
you're saying that it can do that kind of learning on your own environment, then effectively, and it's
Yeah, for Defend for
oh,
Identity, that's right. Yep. And the
that's
great
pretty
thing is
cool.
by unifying all this, you mentioned kind of modern attack and modern threats that we face in security now. You know,
Hmm.
the attackers, they want to get in and they want to spread themselves as far as possible. They're not just landing a virus on your PC. They're landing a
Yeah,
virus on your PC and then they're trying to get into your domain controllers, or they're getting into your domain controllers and then they're trying to get to your Office 365 to do more
yeah.
discovery. And the idea is with 365 Defender, we can tie all that up and tell the full attack story as the attacker moves from point A to point B.
Yeah, and so I mean, maybe you'll touch on this in a second, Rue, but obviously coming from the Azure side of the fence, we know we've got something like Azure Sentinel, which is
Mm.
that broad SIEM and source system, I guess, rather than an XDR type. Well, I don't know. I'm not a security person to that extent, but we know that we can kind of scan lots of things and bring in metrics and kind of do this kind of correlating of events, I guess, together to understand where a particular threat or an attack vector is happening in. Where does something like 365 Defender sit along? Do you know, Rue, in terms of where it sits with that ecosystem, with Sentinel being another product set?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It gets a little bit complicated. I'll try and simplify it.
Mm.
So, 365 Defender, that kind of sits in the Microsoft 365 space. So, in my head, I think about the different clouds that Microsoft have. They have
Mhm.
Dynamics, which sits away over there, and that's scary business stuff.
Yep.
You have Azure, which is, it's your IaaS, your PaaS, a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. And then you have Microsoft 365. In my head, that's how I kind of think about their three clouds. And as 365 Defender sits kind of firmly in that Microsoft 365 branch. It's licensed by users rather than by utilization, like a lot of Azure stuff is. And it's for endpoints and it's for identities. However, and this is where Sentinel and Azure will come into it, is let's say, we want to have more visibility. We don't just care about, identities, Office 365, cloud apps and endpoints. We've also got firewall logs we want to ingest. We've got a whole bunch of other services in our IT that are providing all this telemetry and all this logging. And that's where Sentinel comes into play. So if I kind of illustrate this maybe a little bit more, what you then maybe find is 365 Defender is then going to start sending stuff into Sentinel, and that sits right at the top. But what might also come into Sentinel is, so for example, I might have other logs from other third-party stuff. So if I go over here, get that right. You know what I mean? So I might have other firewall logs.
You'll have to zoom back down in a sec, Roo, once you've drawn it, because it's just off the
We're
top of your
sitting
screen. It's all right.
Jeez, you amateur over here. But
yes, great, isn't it? Trying to zoom.
So there we go.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, got you. So
top.
Yeah, so this is effectively all of these feeds they'll come into a 365 Defender, which, like you say, you get as a service based on your 365 licensing, whatever you've got in there. You've got this single pane of glass there readily available to use. But Sentinel it's sat in Azure. It's a log analytics workspace with some overlay that you can feed all of these metrics into, as well as other wider things, physical devices, firewalls, routers, switches, syslog servers, all of that kind of stuff then that can kind of, that's great fun. That sounds to me great fun of trying to find threats through all of that sort of stuff. But I guess that's what Sentinel's there to do then. It's that product.
It is, yes. And the great thing is, Sentinel is really good at throwing a whole bunch of raw logs into it and then having someone kind of pry some sense to it to filter through it. The great thing is if you use Microsoft 365 Defender, it will kind of filter it before it gets to Sentinel. So rather than sending you every single tiny little bit of log, it'll only send you the incidents that you care about.
Okay,
that's the
that
idea.
makes sense. Okay,
a little bit of
that makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Through I can see how that's built up now, where the logs are being sent. So I guess it's a case of, if you are a 365 customer or consumer, am I right in thinking you've got this service readily available, or do you need to license each of those components separately?
So it's a good question. So licensing that's always.
I was going to say, Ray, before you get stuck into licensing, I was going to avoid the licensing question, but
no, it's a good one because it's important. Until about 4 months ago, you had to have E5 or a subset of E5 to get all this stuff. Recently, though, they've introduced 2 new plans. So you have something called Defender for Endpoint Plan 1, which is for E3 customers, and that gives you some of it, but not all of it. You don't get a lot of the advanced telemetry, but you get a central place where you can go and see alerts about malware on people's PCs. And you also have something called Defender for Business, which is kind of the full shebang, but it's limited to 300 users if you have Microsoft 365 Business Premium. So there's a whole bunch of ways you can get into this. You don't have to go for E5 anymore.
But I guess that's right at time of recording, Roo. I think those licensing questions always have a tendency to evolve over time, don't they, I guess?
Good
in my
disclaimer.
Experience anyway.
Yeah, always talk to your licensing expert, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. Cool. Okay.
So I guess if I move on a little bit, I'll kind of show you how all this kind of plays out and some of the cool stuff we might be able to do. I've tried to spin up I do have a lab environment, but it's got some confidential stuff that I can't really share on
I'm with you
on the broadcast. So I've tried to spin up my own one within the last hour, probably unsuccessfully, but I'll try and show you some stuff. So I'll start by endpoints, right? So I can see here, I can go in, I can get a list of all the computers that are protected. I've got one in this case, it's pretty blank, but I can jump in there and I can do a whole bunch of stuff as an incident responder. So say, for example, I get an alert, there's a piece of malware on this PC. they'll be grayed out for me until it's finished onboarding. But I go in here and I can kick off virus scans. I can initiate a live response, which is quite cool. It won't let me do it here, but essentially what that is, it's almost like it's basically a terminal session directly to the PC. It's going to let me execute commands, gather forensic information, so I can start figuring out, what's going on here.
So this is almost, I mean, you said that there's more to it, but to kind of, in my layman's mind, this is your antivirus and malware detection agent that sat on those endpoints that you can do stuff with. And I guess it's that stuff that is the differentiator with Microsoft is the extent as to what that does.
Yes, that's right. So, you think of, I mean, I don't know your background, Johnny, but, I think about back when I was kind of, internal sysadmin and we had an antivirus, and you deploy it to all your PCs and it would report back to you, oh, this PC's got a virus, that PC's got a virus. And that was really all you would find out, right? But when you go through Defender for Endpoint and you get your devices into Defender for Endpoint, not only is it doing that, I'll see if I can pull some of it here. Depends how far my labs come on. But basically, it has a sensor engine. So there's a service that runs in the background, and kind of think of that as a telemetry logger. And what you can see here is, I'll maybe zoom in and see if that makes it a bit clearer. But I'm now in the timeline for the device. And this is just to give you an example of the kind of telemetry it's picking up. But you can see here, it's looking at all the processes that are initiating, all the web traffic, the network traffic that's going on. And the idea is here, well, not only are we looking for signatures, we know what the viruses are, we know what the malware is, but we're actually looking for strange behavior. So, a lot of attackers, they'll use a number of techniques, but to simplify it, they'll use stuff called lol bins, which is living off the land binaries. So they can use the built-in tools of Windows to compromise Windows itself. They don't necessarily have to go away and install a virus. They can just compromise you because they know their way around the system and they know its weak points. And it will look at all that activity and say, oh, by the way, this looks suspicious. You might want to investigate it. Or it can automatically do some remediation as well.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, great. So that's, like you say, that's the stuff that's coming from the agent installed on those endpoints coming back into the portal that you can kind of
that's right.
have a little look at.
Yes, that's right. And I'm showing you it here for one PC, but you magnify that across your whole estate. You can start joining the dots and saying, well, something strange happened here, something strange happened over here. And what Defender will do is it will group all those alerts together in an incident, and it'll say, here's an attack story as it's happening.
And I'm guessing, Rude, that those kind of things, do they come through this portal, so the security portal for 365 Defender, as alerts? Can you create or can you search for your alerts? Is that what this portal is then able to give us?
Yeah, sure. So I probably won't. I'll try and kick some off later on in the demo. But yeah, so I can see here I've got an alert here. Well, sorry, I'm in an incident. Now, there's two things. Yep. You have alerts and you have incidents. An incident is a grouping of alerts because they look like they're part of the same attack. So, for example, we've got here an incident activity from an infrequent country, and that's pulled it in. So, for example, if I jump into that, there we go. We can see some information about that. And I probably hit the refresh button. Oh, no, it's taking me over to Defender for Cloud Apps. So it's pulling through that data, not only from my endpoints, it's pulling it through from Defender for Cloud Apps and saying, hey, you're signing in from a country that we don't recognize. And I didn't actually mean to go over there, so we'll go back. But as an example, let's say there's some strange malware happens on the PC, and then immediately after that's followed by the user signing in from an unknown location, it would join those dots and say, wait a second, malware executed on this user's PC, and now they're signing in from somewhere strange. Has that malware compromised their credentials? And it'll present that to you in one nice, easy story.
Right. Yes, that makes sense. Okay. And they're all, those incidents are effectively automatically generated in terms of the risk, like you say, from wherever it's coming from, if it's the endpoint, if it's Cloud App Security, or wherever those metrics or those feeds are coming from. I guess it's creating these kind of incidents for you.
Yeah, that's right. And particularly for endpoints, what's quite cool is it will assign a risk score to a device. And, this is where you really get into the value of the Microsoft stuff. So for example, if I go to, I'm in Intune now, and within Intune, we can have what are called compliance policies. The compliance policy basically says, is this device meeting the benchmark we say it has to meet?
Mm-hmm.
The compliance policy can go to Defend for Endpoint and say, hey, what's your risk score? In this one here, I'll jump in there. I'll go to properties. And we can see here what I'm basically saying is require the device to be at or under the machine risk score of low.
Okay.
Now, the great thing about that is I can then bake that into conditional access. And I can say, don't let the user sign in if their device is at a certain risk level. So that's your kind of, I try to stay away from the marketing buzzwords and stuff, but, zero trust is the big buzz phrase within security these days. And it's all about taking data from as many sources as possible and making as accurate a decision as possible. And that's pretty close to it as far as we can see in real time. What is the risk state of this device? And if it's too risky, don't let them connect. So it's really
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so that's taking, like you say, that's a set of feeds from a device, making a decision on whether we want it to use our apps or consume data from our applications, and we can kind of control that through Intune and a conditional access policy. And it's kind of, this is, like you say, this is where all the services and the tech features kind of interlink and support and complement each other, I guess. Then is that what's happening, Rue?
Yeah, spot on. And again, it's just where Microsoft do have a unique advantage over a lot of these third-party vendors. It's you're buying into the platform rather than the individual service.
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot in my travels over the years, is where some companies will absolutely have technologies in place to service a certain area, and Microsoft will have that. I mean, in my experience, again, Microsoft give a lot of bang for the buck in certain licensing SKUs. Back to the licensing question again, but a lot of the time businesses can kind of consume those services from Microsoft. But I don't know how's that landscape at the moment, Rue, in terms of, are people still, in that zone of going, well, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket, or do they now see and realize, like you say, that the kind of the better together nature of Microsoft features and functionality?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'd say, in my experience talking with customers, it seems to be kind of half and half, insofar as you have camp where they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket, and then you have the other side who really see that as being where they can be most productive. So, I probably fall into that camp, biased because it's my job. But to me, it makes sense because there is security and simplicity. And if you can have all your IT staff learn one set of products using one easy, understandable set of exam guides, they don't have to play around with making different pieces of software talk to each other. It lets you mobilize to incident response a lot quicker than if you've got to go away and join all the dots yourself.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. And I think, again, I relate to my experiences with, because I'm an infrastructure person. At heart, I've had my time with 365, so I've done a fair amount of Exchange migrations and stuff with Lync and Skype over the years. But certainly, like, I always joke with people that you kind of do in 365, you kind of became a de facto, you kind of had to do security because it was kind of baked into the products. You kind of have to talk about it because it is at the forefront. And so I guess what we're saying here is this subset of features and services from Microsoft cover, and I guess from my viewpoint, we're not talking this is a 100% complete end-to-end solution that's a silver bullet that's going to cater for every security need that your business has. I think it's probably wise to make that clear for people watching as well, is that this is an element, a subset of security, I take it, over those 4 key areas that you're able to take feeds in. It still leaves a lot of space for other security products and functionality to fit into. Is that fair enough for me to say that, Rue, from the 365 point of view?
That's absolutely fair to say. I mean, the first kind of conversation I'll have with anyone when I'm dealing with any piece of security service is, it's such a cliche, but there's no silver bullets in this kind of stuff. First of all,
and I guess it's a constant moving target. I mean, that's an interesting point because I know some of the features in that 365 piece for the data, like things like, is that where safe links and safe attachments, from my Exchange days, I
Yes.
remember it being called safe links, safe attachments, giving that kind of that 0-day ability to kind of scan attachments. Is that still, has that improved since I last looked at it, which would be a few years ago now, Roo, if I'm being honest?
Yeah, no, it's a good one. So, if we think about that Office 365, Defender for Office 365 I mentioned, that's exactly where that comes in. So it will do it. Let me know if it was like this when you were using it, but as an example, not only will it do, so it will rewrite URLs so that at the time the user clicks it, you've got protection, because a URL might become weaponized after delivery, right?
Yes.
So it will do that not only for email, but it will do it for Teams, for links that are within documents. It will do it across Office 365, not just
That's
email.
very cool. Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's moved on a bit then since I
yeah,
last saw it there.
and you also mentioned,
Obviously with work we use it, but
yeah,
it was only ever on email. You say now that's right across the board with any
yes.
links
So
that are put
that,
in.
that's kind of a recurring pattern. So, for example, we've got this thing called safe attachments, and what that does, it started with, it's most folk will use it for email because that's such a big attack surface, but
Sure.
as a potential threat comes through an attachment, rather than just doing kind of traditional signature based antivirus scanning, what it does is it takes that attachment, sends it to a sandbox virtual machine in the cloud, does what's called a detonation, and then it looks to see, well, what did the file actually do? Did it create registry entries? Did it create scheduled tasks? And we're able to do that not just for email, but we can actually do that for Office 365 files as well. So just any, for example, Excel, Word, PowerPoint file that you open on your computer, you can do it for those as well. It doesn't have to have come through email. So again, it's about broadening the scope. So we're not just focusing on email, focusing on all of 365.
And that's great. Yeah, that's definitely expanded across 365. It was just on email, if I remember rightly. Oh, what, 5 years ago now? 4 years ago, maybe something like that. But it sounds like, and one thing I read as well is that it does kind of real-time scan. Is that right, Roo? Where you can kind of almost on download or upload of files to a team site or a SharePoint site, you can have it do some actual scanning of the file at that point in time as well. I think.
Yes, you can.
Don't quote me. I'm pretty sure I read
No,
something about
no,
that.
you're right. There's a couple things. So we can get asynchronous scanning for anything in SharePoint and OneDrive, and therefore Teams. It will kind of churn through all that data at rest and do malware scanning, all of it. But we can also have real-time protection. You mentioned, so say for example, I tried to upload a virus to OneDrive or SharePoint, right?
Yeah.
So it can scan those in real time as I'm uploading them. But this is where that Defender for Cloud Apps comes in. And what we
Okay,
can
yeah.
actually do is we can say, well, don't just do it for Office 365. If I'm using Dropbox, if I'm using Box, or really any other service that lets me upload files, take that same technology and apply it to those other SaaS services. And that's using Defender for Cloud Apps.
I mean, I might be naive here, Roo, in terms of security. I absolutely am. I'm in no way a security consultant, or that. But I think even that, back to that point around, should businesses think about using that better together services? And I'm a bit like you, Roo. Maybe slightly biased. Maybe we wear the slightly blue tinted lens at times, but like I'm sure like you, Roo, we work for partners, Microsoft partners, so we're able to kind of offer that almost maybe slightly biased because we work in the area. But when it comes to things like this clearly is the benefit to businesses of buying those licensing SKUs. The fact that you're not just shipping out an agent, having it do its thing, and then shipping another agent out over there. These things are talking to each other, and they're able to share data and insights with each other that we can then do other clever stuff with. And is that fundamentally what we got going on here with this ability to set a policy across all of your 365 data effectively? Yeah, that's
definitely it. The amount of time, resource, and therefore money that businesses save because everything just talks to each other out the box. It's literally a tick box in every app to make them talk to each other rather than going and having to wait and develop your own bespoke thing. You save so much time, and therefore you get security because you're able to mobilize it very, very quickly.
And like you say, all of these metrics as well, if there were to be some kind of a malware or a 0-day thing that happens to be in a file, or if you've got an internal bad actor, so to speak, and somebody trying to deliberately upload malicious files, all of that's going to get blocked, logged, scanned, reported, alerted.
Spot on. And so, for example, you talk about 0-day. That's kind of the buzz, and that's what a lot of folks are scared of. So on endpoints, Windows 10, Windows 11, and again, this is just where you get such value from the sheer scale of Microsoft. Is it has a feature called Cloud Delivered Protection, which I've got the settings up for on the screen now. And what Cloud Delivered catch my words here. What Cloud Delivered Protection does is it essentially takes a layered approach to when a file is executed. So, for example, if I execute a file, it looks at it and it gives it a probability of how much does this look like malware. Sure, it hasn't met my signature list, so I can't say for sure, but what's the probability? And then what it will do is it will pass it to the cloud for analysis. Okay. And it will do more things. It'll look at the metadata of it, and it'll progress all the way through to detonating that executable. So for example, if malware is brand new and it's never been seen before, what Cloud Delivered Protection lets you do is something called block at first sight. So you try to execute that file. Defender says, hey, I've looked at millions of devices across the whole world. I know what runs out there, and I've never seen this file before, which is kind of raising red flags for me. So it puts a stop on it while it does that analysis, and it looks at it to see how risky it is. And just, we're talking 4 or 5 tick boxes to get this enabled. And it's such, it's the whole 80-20 principle, right? You can mobilize this stuff so quick, and just with a few settings, you can protect against the vast, vast majority of anti-malware. And you're always going to have edge cases and really sophisticated attacks, but for your average organization, it'll provide a ton of value.
It's like you say. I mean, I don't know where, and again, this is probably more opinion than anything, but where do you see 365 Defender sitting in? Do you see it primarily for that kind of medium to small enterprise level business? Is it an enterprise ready, scalable solution, or do you see those kind of larger businesses going off for other products? Again, it's probably more opinion and anecdotal than anything, but where do you see this product set fitting in that kind of, and I guess it's different in the UK compared to US and size of businesses.
It's a good question. It's a good question. And, it's funny because I don't think I'm ready to make an official announcement on it yet, but I'll sneak it into this video. I'm writing a book on all this stuff. And as part of the book, I've had to do a ton of research, right? And, I wanted to address the elephant in the room in the book, which is, using Microsoft for security. And if you've been in the game as long as I have, there was a time when you would just laugh. You know what I mean? Windows Defender didn't have a good reputation, but it's a totally changed space now. And there are, if we're talking about stuff that isn't just my opinion, you can look at Forrester reports, you can look at Gartner Magic Quadrants. They're up there. Defender for Endpoint, Defender for 365 is always in that top right quadrant. Microsoft are plowing resource into this. I've seen it done in massive, massive environments. So it's not just for kind of small to medium businesses. Although they would definitely benefit from it, you can deploy this to organizations, and I've seen it deployed to organizations with tens, hundreds of thousands of users. It's absolutely suitable for those as well.
Do you know what, Rue? I kind of said that in a bit of a loaded way just to see your reaction to it, but only because you said I was going to bring this up, actually, is that, and I think I brought it up in other conversations, Microsoft, I think in general, has had that kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, but this kind of reputation of releasing pretty shoddy products version 1.0 and people just looking at them and going, yeah, that'll never take off. But, I mean, I guess this is what I say to people, why I've chosen to stick with Microsoft to be, a big part of my career, is that by the time they get to version 2, you've got a few people looking up going, what are they up to over there with this old Microsoft? Oh, they're never a security firm. Don't worry, that'll never take off. It happened with, unified comms, with Teams. It's happened in loads of different areas. Yeah. And then version 3, version 4, all of a sudden, like you say, they're up in that top right-hand quadrant. And before you know it, they are taking on the big boys and actually and don't get me wrong, it sounds like a big, kind of Microsoft spiel and speak and whatnot. But do you see it in the same way, Rue? Do you see it
Yeah.
like that? Or am I leading down the wrong? Because that's the way I view things. Is that sometimes, yes, Microsoft release stuff. It's not brilliant. Stick with it, and if they're serious about it, it'll get to the point where actually it's enterprise grade, it is enterprise ready, and then you almost end up in this really strange conversation of naysayers or people with a different approach from different vendors, and you get into those bun fights, I suppose, over which product has got this, which, and it's like a really tricky place to be.
Yeah, you can get into that, right, where you've got product A versus product B, and it just becomes a case of looking down the checklist and comparing the features, right? And I tried to avoid that because, again, I'm big picture. I'm thinking about, well, what's the whole platform rather than the individual service. As far as, that's a good point about, maybe version 1 isn't so good, but by the time you get to V4, it's a real contender. Honestly, Defender for Endpoint specifically within this, that's your perfect example for what you've just said. Insofar as when it first comes out, you're like, yeah, okay, whatever, it's fine. And then all of a sudden they start supporting more operating systems. And all of a sudden those operating systems start getting more features, and everything just starts building up and building up and building up to the point where now, I'm like, there are alternatives out there, and they're really good. Things like CrowdStrike, really, really capable services. But if you're already in that Microsoft ecosystem, I'm thinking, why bother? It really is that impressive a platform.
Yeah, is it like that trade-off between? Absolutely, I think you've got these industry third parties that are really at the height of their game, that will offer you every bell and whistle that you need from a particular feature set. Whereas Microsoft might offer you that 80% or that 90%. But actually, because Microsoft is an ecosystem of one vendor, that 10% that you're missing is made up for in other ways, or in different ways of viewing a service and product. So, and I guess, is that where we're at now with 365 Defender? I've seen that it's gone through a few name changes over the last year or two. Clearly, it's up there. You've mentioned now, we're not at that stage with this set of products. We're at the stage now where we're saying, look, Gartner, the Magic Quadrant, it's up there. It is a recognized set of products in the security space that is to be taken seriously. And forgive me of my naive question, to be honest, Rue, because I don't deal with it on such a daily basis. It's one of those things that, I've had conversations on in other areas when it comes to Microsoft products, and it always seems to go that way, that, we're getting there. Actually, we're there now, and we've arrived. It can do all of this good stuff. So that's where we're at, you think, with the 365?
I do, yeah. I think we're at that stage of maturity where, if you are an organization that is at that, you're at that kind of license renewal cycle every 3 years, every CIO or CISO has to go through it. It's definitely something that you should be considering, especially if you're already in that Office 365 space, which, so many enterprises are, right?
Yeah.
It just makes sense.
I was going to say, Rue, to kind of start to wrap up the piece now around Defender. I mean, is there any message you want to give to people that have got kind of 365 licensing when it comes to Defender? Is there a conversation you tend to have with businesses when they're thinking about their security posture?
Yeah, no, good question. So I guess, the first one is you can get a trial license for all this stuff. Kick the tires on it, take it for a spin, see how you feel, see what your gut reaction is when you start deploying it. I know that when, the first time I got my hands on, back when it was called Advanced Threat Protection, it was eye-opening to me. Just such an impressive platform. But it's free trial. Kick the tires on it, see how you get on. Also, remember the way that licensing works is you don't have to go for it all at once. You can phase these things. So, for example, start small. Start with your E3, and then add on the E5 security, then add on the E5 compliance, and then go for the full E5 shebang. You know what I mean? You don't have to pay for everything if you're not going to have the resource to implement it all yet.
With you, yeah.
And I guess that's it.
Rue, that's been awesome. I mean, look, let's just head back to our 2-cam review and wrap this up then. But no, huge thanks, Rue, for coming on and kind of, like I say, I've had little bits of insights over the last few years, but because you don't work closely with these product sets, it's always nice to have a bit of a where are we today, and that was fantastic. So hopefully that was as good for people watching as it was for me, Rue. So yeah, huge thanks for coming on and saying hello and taking us through that.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, John.
No, anytime, and no doubt we will cross paths on the socials again very soon.
Absolutely. See you soon.
Thanks a lot, Rue. See you soon.